The recently announced Indo-Pacific strategy is, for me, I think, a great example of the marriage between our diplomacy and international trade. So being here today is quite timely. In this regard, I'm wondering how our diplomatic and trade officers go about finding the balance between Canada's priorities around human rights and our successes in trade that we strive for. There's a number of countries that the Indo-Pacific have that may run quite different to what Canadians would deem appropriate when it comes to issues around women's rights, for instance, or adherence to what we may define as democratic norms. So how does Global Affairs Canada, through your office, balance, on the one hand, putting pressure on these countries to respect the human rights, while at the same time telling Canada is open, ready, and aggressive for business? How do we manage these trade-offs?
That's a terrific question. It's what I spend every day, I guess, in this job, working with my colleagues in the department, but also my colleagues across the way in Minister Jolie's area, as well as Minister Sajjan's area. And maybe I'll just, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to just take just one slight sort of step back for a second. I mean, I'm the minister. I mean, when you heard the Mr. Chair sort of, read the title, I'm not only the International Trade Minister, but I'm also the Economic Development and Small Business Minister. The reason for that is that for international trade, I mean, international trade is so important to the Canadian economy because one out of 6 jobs in Canada is related to trade. And 2/3 of our economy is dependent on trade. So it's very much a part of our history. We also are seeing the incredible innovations and the kinds of enterprises, whether it is in clean technology or in agri-foods and agri-tech, and a range of new businesses, particular small ones in innovative areas like AI and so forth, that's emerging as small and medium-sized enterprises. So the Prime Minister very deliberately put the two files together so that in the course of growing those opportunities, we are also doing so in a way for the businesses that are small, but also those that have often been underrepresented in our economy, like women or Indigenous people or immigrant businesses and so forth. So where am I going with this? I mean, international trade is not just about where we trade, what we trade, but who trades. And we create and we spend a lot of time creating and negotiating robust trade agreements. And I would proudly say that we are the best in the world. And we negotiate terms into trade agreements that I think are also forward-leaning. So those might remember that the TPP became the CPTPP. I remind my colleagues in that agreement around that table, just not that long ago, when they're talking about how the high standards agreement is such something that we value. But what are those standards? It is standards on the environment, protections for labor rights, ensuring that our agreements in our trade agreements have provisions for who trades, which are those small and medium-sized enterprises, but inclusive of women enterprises, for example. So when we are around the trade negotiating table, like in the Indo-Pacific, where we are at the trade negotiating table with Indonesia right now, but also with the ASEAN countries, these very features of the Canadian trade agreements is part of that. So when you're at the negotiating table together, you're negotiating as equal partners, and you come to agreement on those very issues that are really important to Canadians and our values and democratic values. And we are able to work with them in a way to come to an understanding of that trade framework and those sets of rules that will bind us.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to interrupt you because we're well over the 4-minute mark there.